cameo Jamahal Hill for us.
Alright guys, Aniki here. So, UFC 311 just wrapped up, and I have to say, it was an alright card. All of the fights that I expected to be fun were fun, and 10 out of the 12 predictions that I made were correct, giving me an 83.3% correct pick ratio, including perfect picks for the main card. The only fights that I got wrong were the two bantamweight fraud checks of Peyton Talbot and Rin Nakamura, which I'll get into later. I also didn't bother picking the women's MMA fight because, I can't be bothered to watch tape on women's MMA. This pick percentage also happened to make me the most accurate predictor on MMA YouTube for this card. So, getting into the breakdown of this fight card, the first thing I have to say is I told you so about Jiri and Merab. And for proof of that, here are the clips from my prediction video. So, starting with Jiri, here was my take. He's razor focused on finding Jamal's chin, and here's why I think he'll find it. If you watch a Jamahal Hill fight and compare it to Jiri's fights, you'll notice two major discrepancies: the speed of their opponents and the difference in footwork. Except for Pereira, none of Jamal's opponents were as fast as Alexander Rakic or Volkan Oezdemir, both of whom Jiri knocked out in the second round. Except for Alex Pereira, all of Jamal's opponents are plotsters. I think Jiri winning this fight would have been an easy call to make for anybody who has ever watched tape of these two fighters side by side. Throughout the fight with Jamal, Jiri's head movement was simply too fast for Hill's footwork, and as a result, Jamal couldn't catch him clean. And in my prediction video, I also said this: I'm taking Jiri Prochazka by round 2 TKO. Specifically, I think Jiri is going to catch him with a right straight to left overhand combo after Jamahal Hill throws his jab, since Jamal's chin tends to go up in the air whenever he throws a power jab with any type of commitment. The left overhand over the lazy lead hand of Jamal is what dropped Jamal in the first round, and it is also what led to the finishing sequence in the third round. I know that a lot of people were counting Jiri out after his KO loss to Pereira, but I think that was a bit of a dumb idea when considering how Jiri has been flatlined in the past in Rizin, but his chin has otherwise been pretty fine. You have to hit very hard to even wobble Jiri, and Jamahal Hill has very overrated power. As I said in my prediction video, Jamahal Hill's atrocious footwork leads to his punches and kicks lacking power. If your footwork is as bad as Jamal's, all the power which should be going from your hips to your fists won't be transferred. And as a result, even when Jiri was being caught flush by Jamal's punches, it didn't faze him. The best adjustment that Jamal made throughout the fight was going to Jiri's body, but that simply wasn't enough to make up for the fact that Jamahal Hill simply isn't an elite fighter. And not only does Hill have overrated power, but his overall technical fighting ability is highly exaggerated. Throughout the fight, Joe Rogan was saying Jamahal Hill was the more technical fighter while Jiri was the wild one. I think this is a grossly incorrect analysis. The better description for this would be to say that Jamal is a very conventional fighter who relies on the basics like the 1-2, the lead hook, and the straight left. But the problem is, Jamal doesn't even have good form for those. Meanwhile, Jiri is unorthodox, but everything that he throws is with good technique. His straight punches are very sharp and very fast, and Jiri's bladed stance is perfect for transferring power into these blows. For Jiri, I think what's next for him is pretty obvious. It's going to be the winner of Ulberg versus Blachowicz. And if it's Blachowicz, I hope they do a UFC Fight Night card in Eastern Europe at some point later on this year. For Hill, he needs to take some time off because he took quite a bit of damage. But I would say he should fight someone like Khalil Roundtree. I can very much see Hill going on a huge loss streak from this point onwards because of his poor mentality towards fighting. Anyways, moving on to Merab versus Umar, here's what I had to say about this fight. Now, the reason why Merab has a good chance of beating Umar is because there's been rumors that Umar is coming into this fight with an injured hand. This is a pretty big deal because not only would this affect Umar's striking, but it'll also affect his grappling defense against Merab. Merab really likes these two positions, the body lock with his opponent up against the cage, and the front headlock. The way you get out of these positions is by fighting Merab's grip, which Umar would struggle with if he has an injured hand. Also, the biggest threat that Umar presents is his kicks. His boxing looked alright against Sandhagen, But honestly, Sandhagen looked like he was more focused on defending takedowns than he was on actually landing his own offense. Merab has fought much more dangerous strikers than Umar, like O'Malley, Jan, Jose Aldo, and Marlon Moraes, and came out on top. So, my pick for this fight is Merab by 48-47 decision. And guess what Umar said after the fight?
And after first round, I can't punch because I think I broke my hand, and games go like other way,
For this fight, not only did I predict the method of victory and the number of points that Merab would get, but also the precise excuse that Umar Nurmagomedov would give for losing this fight. And also, I would just add that I think it was ridiculous that Joe Rogan tried to set up a rematch between Umar and Merab by doing this interview here. Because although Umar won the first 2 rounds, those 2 rounds were quite close, with one judge giving round 1 to Merab. However, the final 3 rounds were as clear as day. Now, I did do a little bit of clickbait by putting fraud check on the thumbnail of this video, but I think what we saw today was how Umar failed to fully utilize the weapons he had access to, highlighting a lack of experience. One of the key mistakes that Umar made was not throwing enough open stance front and snap kicks to Merab's body. Even if he was afraid of getting taken down, Umar showed that he was fully capable of matching Merab's wrestling. At least early on, Instead, Umar decided to throw lead leg question mark kicks and box with Merab in the pocket, despite having that hand injury. If Umar had hurt Merab to the body early, he could have neutralized Merab's cardio advantage or even sniped Merab's liver, since Umar was the southpaw and Merab was the orthodox fighter in this matchup. Now, as for what's next for these 2 fighters, I think Merab should be allowed to take some time off. Enjoy being a champion, get some rest, heal up. I know that he came into this fight with an injury, and, maybe he could take a victory tour in Georgia and flex on top of the Caucasus to assert dominance over Dagestan. When Merab comes back, I think he should fight the winner of a Piotr Jan versus Sean O'Malley rematch. I also believe that with this win over Umar, Merab has cemented himself as the bantamweight GOAT, and I don't see anybody beating him anytime soon. The only thing I see stopping Merab is his age, since he's currently 34, and if you didn't know this already, nobody above the age of 35 has won a title fight in a division that is lower than lightweight. So maybe Merab eventually ages out of the division. Who knows? On the other hand, I think Umar should be made to fight significantly down in the rankings. He only got this opportunity against Merab because he beat Sandhagen, and the only reason he got that opportunity against Sandhagen is because he's Khabib's cousin. I would say Umar needs to fight the winner of Yadong versus Cejudo, or maybe even a Mario Bautista. Anyways, getting to the rest of the card, I think the main event was quite predictable. Moicano got subbed by Makhachev in round 1 after getting tagged a bit on the feet, and honestly I think this performance cements Makhachev as the lightweight GOAT. Even though Moicano was fighting on short notice, he did have a full training camp, and Moicano is primarily a grappler. The fact that Makhachev was able to submit Moicano easier than Khabib did McGregor, Gaethje, and Poirier, who are all strikers, is extremely impressive. Personally, I hope that Makhachev moves up to welterweight and fights the winner of Bilal versus Shavkat, but he also could just cement his legacy as the lightweight GOAT even further by remaining in the division and fighting Charles Oliveira again, or maybe Arman Sarukian again. Although Dana White said at the post-fight presser that Arman is not going to be getting a title shot when he comes back. As for the rest of the card, I knew that Almeida would destroy Spivak because Almeida beats any heavyweight who isn't athletic. However, the way that he got it done was more exciting than usual, with him actually hurting Spivak on the feet before finishing him with some ground and pound. I also thought that Almeida's call-out of Cyril Gane is completely justified, especially since Cyril Gane should have lost to Volkov in their rematch. If John Jones versus Tom Aspinall gets made, Cyril Gane versus Jailton Almeida should be put on the undercard as a backup. And as for the main card, I called Holland versus De Ridder Tati. I said that Holland would quit as soon as De Ridder got him to the ground, and that's what he did. I think anybody who picked Holland, despite knowing how little Holland cares about his career, is kinda silly. Holland can easily make welterweight, but chooses to fight at middleweight because he can't be bothered to diet or cut water. Meanwhile, De Ridder is big enough to fight at light heavyweight. Holland should go down to welterweight and fight, Mike Malott or Neil Magny or some other top 20 or top 30 fighter who he can beat without trying all that hard. Meanwhile, I think De Ridder has earned a ranked opponent with his performance, so I think he should fight Michel Pereira, who's coming off that brutal mauling from Anthony Hernandez. But if De Ridder isn't going to be given a ranked opponent, I think he should fight Roman Kopylov or Abus Magomedov. The one other thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to this card was how every single undefeated prospect kept losing and losing. There was Umar Nurmagomedov in the main event, of course, but there was also Peyton Talbot, who, for some reason, just loved being on bottom against Barcelos. You know, I just can't figure out why this guy loves being on bottom.
I got into editing because of anime editing.
Oh, wait, you're talking about that type of stuff.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. She's like my, well, she I think Parkus is boy to girl. Very attractive girl now. Very attractive girl now.
And with that, Peyton Talbot is never going to be anything serious in the UFC. This was probably one of the biggest fraud checks of all time. Barcelos is an older, chinny fighter, but the fact that Talbot showed no wrestling ability just means that anybody who wants to fight him from this point onwards knows they can just double leg him to a 30-27 win. And as for my countryman, Rinya Nakamura, well, that was a very disappointing performance from him as well. To be completely honest, I've never been that high on Rinya, and that's primarily because he is a tiny bantamweight. You can tell this by looking at the fight night weights for UFC 298, where Rinya weighed in at 147.2 pounds, while Merab weighed in at 156.8 pounds. Giving up an entire weight class worth of weight just is not going to work in the long run. However, Rinya's issue tonight wasn't his weight, but the fact that he kept trying to strike with Gafarov on the feet, when he could have simply wrestled instead. Now, Gafarov is a decently sized bantamweight, unlike Rinya, but Rinya's technical advantage in wrestling should have compensated for that. As for Rinya, he needs to take some time off, he needs to improve his skills, and he needs to go down to flyweight. He doesn't have KO power at bantamweight, and he doesn't have the jiu-jitsu necessary to finish his opponents. Oh yeah, and also Clayton Carpenter lost to Tagir Ulanbekov, so that was another undefeated prospect who lost. But then again, Tagir was the favorite in that one, so, well, okay. Anyways, that's the end of this video. Like, share, and subscribe. Bye.